On this episode of Doin the Most, we're making pasta verde.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from meat to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.
I started making pasta a few months ago, and it took me a while to get my process perfected. Kind of like how it took me a while to learn how to bottle condition mead, and clearly I'm still learning. The ingredients for this recipe are pretty basic. It's 10 ounces of bread flour, 2 large eggs, 6 ounces of greens, in this case kale, and a couple tablespoons of water. You'll also need some bench flour. Once you've got your recipe and process down, it's actually pretty simple, and the recipe is fairly scalable. You can divide this recipe into quarters if you'd like. For this, we're using chopped kale, including the stems, some large eggs, and the mead I'm pouring here is an experimental pecan mead that I'm still learning to love. And I keep bread flour just generally on hand because I make so much sourdough these days. So we're gonna measure out the 10 ounces of bread flour. This recipe actually calls for about 12 ounces of flour, but from what I've found, 10 ounces is a good start, and then you can kind of incorporate more flour on the bench as you are kneading the dough. Crack your eggs, and those are gonna go right into a blender, no shells. And then we're measuring out our 6 ounces of greens. And yes, this looks like a lot initially, but we're gonna wilt this in the microwave for about 2 minutes and press out the water. So we kind of create a little satchel of paper towels here, mush it up as best we can, and then pop that in the microwave. And this softens the stems and kind of helps obliterate the leaves. So this helps the greens incorporate into the dough. Be careful because it is releasing quite a bit of hot steam, but just press the liquid out of it. So that way you're left with this little puck of wilted kale. Spread that out some, let it come down closer to room temperature so you don't make scrambled eggs in the blender. And that's all going to go in with your eggs. The goal here is to blend this up until it's completely homogeneous, until it's just kind of like a soupy green liquid. But we want just enough water added to this to make that happen. So what you're looking for is for the blender to kick off into kind of a whirlpool of action. So I just gently add a little bit of water here and there until you get it to this moment here, where it just blends on its own without pausing or gumming up. And then let that run for a solid minute so everything comes together. Then remove any unnecessary equipment from your bench, and we are going to the top camera because it's time to make dough. Pour your flour out into a circle, and then with a couple of fingers create a well in the middle. This is where your egg and kale mixture is going to live. And then pour that egg mixture in and get as much of it out of the blender as you possibly can. I like this little tiny silicone spatula because it can get in kind of all the nooks and crannies there. And then you're going to use your fork to start folding some of the flour into the center. This is less messy than just typical egg pasta, so it incorporates pretty quick. Once you've got it incorporated, you're just going to knead for 5 minutes, adding bench flour as necessary. After 5 minutes, you should have a nice springy pasta dough, which you are then going to cover by a glass bowl for a minimum of 30 minutes. If you're gonna do this any longer, you might just wrap it in some plastic wrap and pop it in the fridge. I've let pasta dough go for a few days before making pasta out of it, and it's been no big deal. Then pour a nice glass of Viking blood clone mead and split your pasta. Now, I have done this quite a few times with a roller, and we were convinced that a sheeter is a much more economical option. Pays for itself in time, and it really gets the thickness consistent throughout your batch. Ratchet that down onto your bench, set it for the 0 setting, and of course make sure your handle is actually on the pasta sheeter. And that first time you run it through, it might be a little tricky. You really need to make sure that your sheeter's got plenty of flour down inside of it to make sure that nothing sticks. And then always be adding bench flour when you feel it's necessary to keep it from sticking. So you'll notice I add bench flour to each side of my dough pretty regularly, just because I've had pasta gum up in the machine and that sucks. So you're gonna keep changing the thickness. Here we're running it on 1. Now onto 2. And this is a lot smoother when you've got a sous chef, so somebody to crank the handle while somebody else messes around with just the dough. And then you're gonna basically repeat this process over and over and over and over again until, in this case, we got it down to a size 8. And this is a pretty thin pappardelle style pasta. So if you want to be real extra and real doing the most, take the scraps after you've cut your pasta, the little bits that don't make a full noodle, and knead those back together. And then you can cut them into little uniform chunks. And if you've got one of these little $6 pasta boards, you can roll out some pasta also. I don't have any clue what this pasta shape is, but I know how to make them, and I'm comfortable enough in that. Essentially what you're doing is just pressing down and rolling, and this board shapes them into these cool little shapes. And there you have it, a whole bunch of pasta. You can let that dry out so that way you can use it kind of whenever you want. Or in our case, we popped some butter in a cast iron skillet, threw in some chunks of leftover Thanksgiving turkey, added some cream, tossed in our al dente pasta, grated a little bit of cured egg yolk on top of that, and we've got this wonderful kind of pseudo carbonara that we had for dinner that night. Once it's all dried out, you can store it in like a paper bag. That way it kind of keeps it dry, and you have beautiful, delicate, nutrient-dense pasta that's kind of fun and brilliantly colored. Nice vivid green. This is probably the first in a series of pasta videos. We've got an all yolk pasta that we want to show you how to make. So if you hit that subscribe button, you can stay tuned for other pasta making adventures coming soon. Thank you for watching. As always, we are Doing the Most OK on Instagram and Pinterest. Our website is doingthemost.org. What's your favorite way to serve pasta? Are you an al dente person? Do you like a cream sauce or maybe a butter mushroom sauce? Let us know in the comments. We're always looking for new things to try in the kitchen. Until next time.